Hey there, awesome viewers. I'm so excited to share a crazy story with you today. Before we get started, I've got a super fun question. Have you ever had a neighbor who acted like they were the boss of everything? Maybe they complained about your dog barking or your music being too loud. Drop a comment below and tell me all about it. Oh, and let me know where you're watching from today, maybe from your bedroom, your kitchen, or even your treehouse. If you love wild stories like this one, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on the fun. Okay, let's dive into this tale. It's a bright, sunny Saturday morning in a super quiet neighborhood. The kind of place where the grass is always cut just right, the flowers bloom in perfect rows, and every mailbox shines like it's brand new. Kids ride their bikes down the street, giggling and racing each other. Old folks sit on their porches, sipping lemonade and waving at everyone who passes by. It's the kind of place where nothing big ever happens, or so everyone thinks. In the middle of all this calm, there's a guy named Jake Miller. Jake's the kind of person who makes you smile just by looking at him. He's got a big, friendly grin, messy brown hair, and eyes that sparkle like he's always up to something fun. Jake's lived in this neighborhood for years, and everybody knows him. He's the guy who helps carry your groceries if your bags are too heavy. He's the one who fixes your kid's bike tire when it goes flat. Jake, just nice. But there's one thing about Jake that stands out more than anything else: his motorcycle. Oh man, Jake loves that motorcycle. It's shiny and black with a big silver engine that gleams in the sun. When he rides it, he feels like he's flying, like nothing in the world can stop him. The bike makes a loud vroom vroom noise when he starts it up, not super loud, not like a monster truck or anything, but loud enough to make you turn your head and go, "Whoa, what's that?" Most people in the neighborhood don't mind the noise. Some even think it's cool. Kids wave at Jake when he rides by, and a few grown-ups secretly wish they had a bike like his. But there's one person who hates that motorcycle with every bit of her heart, and her name is Karen Thompson. Karen's not just any neighbor. She's the president of the Homeowners Association, or HOA for short. That's a fancy name for a group of people who make rules about how the neighborhood should look and act. Karen takes her job way too seriously. She walks around like she's the queen of the street, always carrying a clipboard and a pen, ready to write down anything she doesn't like. Your garbage cans out too early. Karen will leave a note. Your dog digs a tiny hole in your yard. Karen will knock on your door. She's got eyes like a hawk, and she never misses a thing, or so she thinks. To Karen, Jake's motorcycle is the worst thing in the whole world. Every time he rides it, she acts like someone's setting off fireworks in her backyard. Her face gets all red, her hands ball up into fists, and she starts muttering under her breath. "That noise," she'll say, "it's ruining our perfect neighborhood." Jake doesn't get why she's so mad. His bike isn't breaking any rules. He only rides it during the day, and he's super careful not to bother anyone. But Karen doesn't care about that. To her, Jake and his bike are trouble with a capital T. This sunny Saturday starts like any other. Jake wakes up early, eats a big bowl of cereal, and decides it's a perfect day for a ride. He pulls on his favorite leather jacket, the one with a little rip on the sleeve from when he helped a neighbor fix their fence, and heads to his garage. His motorcycle is waiting for him, sparkling in the morning light. Jake smiles as he runs his hand over the handlebars. "Ready for a spin, old friend," he says, like the bike can hear him. He hops on, turns the key, and the engine roars to life with that famous vroom. It's loud for a second, but then it settles into a low rumble. Jake revs it once, just for fun, and pulls out of his driveway. The street is quiet as Jake rides slowly past the neat houses. A couple of kids playing catch in their yard wave at him, and Jake waves back. Mrs. Carter, an older lady who loves baking cookies, gives him a thumbs up from her porch. Jake feels great. The sun's warm, the breeze is cool, and his bike feels like it's part of him. He's not going far, just a quick loop around the block to enjoy the day. When he gets back home, he pulls into his driveway and parks the bike. The engine gives one last vroom before he shuts it off. Jake's grinning ear to ear. To him, that sound is music. But across the street, someone's not smiling at all. Karen Thompson is standing on her front porch, her arms crossed and her eyes squinted like she's trying to stare a hole through Jake. She's wearing her usual outfit, a bright pink sweater and glasses perched on the end of her nose. Her hair's pulled back so tight it looks like it hurts. Karen's been watching Jake the whole time, and she's mad. That vroom from his bike, to her, it's like a giant bee buzzing in her ear. She doesn't care that it's Saturday or that Jake, not hurting anyone, All she can think about is how much she hates that motorcycle. Jake doesn't notice Karen at first. He's too busy wiping down his bike with a rag, making sure it stays shiny. He's humming a little song, totally happy. But then he hears a loud huff from across the street. He looks up and there's Karen glaring at him like he just kicked her cat. "Hey, Karen," Jake calls out, trying to be friendly. "Nice day, huh?" Karen doesn't answer. Instead, she points a finger at him and says, "You and that bike are a problem, Jake Miller. I'm sick of it." Her voice is sharp, like she's scolding a kid who tracked mud into her house. Jake blinks, surprised. He's used to Karen complaining, but today she sounds extra grumpy. "It's just a motorcycle, Karen," he says, keeping his voice calm. "I'm not breaking any rules." Karen's face gets even redder. "Rules," she snaps. "I make the rules around here. That noise is driving everyone crazy." Jake glances around. Nobody else seems bothered. In fact, Mr. Jenkins, the guy next door, is watering his flowers and doesn't even look up. But Karen's not done. She stomps her foot and says, "You'll see, Jake. I'm going to fix this once and for all." Then she turns and marches back into her house, slamming the door so hard the windows rattle. Jake shakes his head and chuckles. "Wow, she's really worked up today," he mutters to himself. He's not worried, though. Karen's always making a fuss about something. Last week, she yelled at a kid for riding a skateboard on the sidewalk. The week before that, she told Mrs. Carter her mailbox was the wrong shade of blue. Jake figures Karen's just being Karen. He tosses his rag into the garage and heads inside to grab a drink, thinking that's the end of it. But what Jake doesn't know, what nobody in the neighborhood knows, is that Karen's about to do something that'll turn this quiet Saturday upside down. Inside her house, Karen's packing back and forth, her phone in her hand. She's muttering to herself, saying things like, "He thinks he can ignore me. Not today." She's got a plan, and it's a big one. Karen's not just going to complain this time. She's going to make sure Jake's motorcycle is gone for good, or so she thinks. Across the street, Jake's sipping a soda, totally clueless about the storm that's brewing. And somewhere nearby, hidden just out of sight, someone else is watching the whole thing. Someone who knows a secret about Karen. A secret that's about to make this day one nobody will ever forget. This is just the start, friends. Jake's motorcycle is loud, sure, but it's nothing compared to the noise Karen's about to make. What's her plan and who's watching from the shadows? Stick with me because this story, only getting wilder from here. Karen Thompson was the kind of neighbor who noticed everything. If your grass grew a tiny bit too tall, she'd pull out a ruler and measure it. If your mailbox had a smudge, she'd leave a mean note taped to it. To Karen, the neighborhood had to be perfect, like a picture in a magazine. And Jake's motorcycle, oh boy, to her it was the worst thing ever. Every time he rode by, her face would scrunch up tight like she just smelled a skunk or stepped in something gross. "That noise," she'd shout, shaking her fist. "It's ruining our quiet street." She'd wave her phone around, acting like she was about to call the mayor or even the president. This sunny Saturday, Jake was just being Jake. He parked his shiny black motorcycle in his driveway after a quick ride around the block. The engine made its usual vroom sound as he turned it off, but it wasn't super loud. Jake didn't think twice about it. He grabbed a rag from his garage and started wiping down his bike, making it sparkle in the sunlight. He was humming a happy little tune, totally relaxed. To him, it was a perfect day, blue sky, warm breeze, and his favorite bike right there. He wasn't bothering anybody, not even a little bit. But across the street, Karen was watching. She stood on her porch, her arms crossed so tight it looked like she was hugging herself. Her glasses sat low on her nose, and her mouth was set in a hard, angry line. She stared at Jake like he'd done something awful, like he'd painted her house purple or thrown a party at midnight. Karen didn't like Jake's motorcycle one bit. To her, that vroom was like a giant alarm clock waking up the whole neighborhood. She didn't care that nobody else seemed to mind. She didn't care that kids waved at Jake or that old Mr. Jenkins next door just kept watering his flowers. To Karen, Jake was the problem, and she was going to make sure everybody knew it. "You think you're so cool, don't you?" Karen yelled from her porch. Her voice was sharp, like a teacher scolding a kid for running in the hallway. Jake looked up from his bike, surprised. He hadn't even noticed her standing there. "What's that, Karen?" he asked, keeping his voice nice and calm. "I'm done with that racket," she snapped, pointing at his motorcycle like it was a monster. "It's too loud and it's driving everyone crazy." Jake tilted his head, confused. He glanced around the street. A couple of kids were riding scooters, laughing. A lady was walking her dog, humming to herself. Nobody looked upset at all. It's not even that loud, Karen, Jake said with a little smile. Come on, live a little, it's just a bike. He wasn't trying to be mean, he was just being honest. But to Karen, those words were like pouring water on a cat. Her eyes got super narrow like tiny slits and her cheeks turned bright pink. Live a little, she repeated, her voice getting louder. You're the one who needs to learn how to live by the rules. She stomped her foot, and Jake could have sworn he heard her porch creak. I'm not putting up with this anymore, she shouted. Then she turned around, marched into her house, and slammed the door so hard the windows shook. Jake stood there holding his rag and scratched his head. Wow, he mumbled to himself. She's really mad today. He chuckled a little, thinking Karen was just being her usual grumpy self. She was always complaining about something. Last month, she got mad because someone left a soccer ball in their front yard. A week ago, she told a kid to stop drawing chalk pictures on the sidewalk. Jake figured she'd cool off eventually. Maybe she'd write him one of her famous notes telling him to park his bike somewhere else. He wasn't worried. He tossed the rag into his garage and stretched his arms, ready to head inside for a snack. But what Jake didn't know was that Karen wasn't just mad, she was planning something. Inside her house, she was packing back and forth in her living room, her slippers slapping against the floor. Her phone was in her hand and her face was still red as a tomato. He thinks he can ignore me, she muttered. He thinks that bike is okay. Well, I'll show him. Karen wasn't going to write a note this time. She wasn't going to knock on Jake's door or talk to the other neighbors. Nope, she had a bigger idea. A much bigger idea, and it was going to make Jake wish he'd never bought that motorcycle, or so she thought. While Karen was scheming, Jake was still outside, totally clueless. He grabbed a bottle of water from his garage and took a big sip, wiping sweat off his forehead. The day was getting warmer, and he was thinking about maybe taking another ride later. He loved how free he felt on his bike, like he could go anywhere. He wasn't trying to make anyone mad, he just loved riding. But as he stood there, something caught his eye. Down the street a little ways past Mr. Jenkins' house, he saw a car. Not a regular car, but one that looked different. It was parked kind of funny, half hidden behind a big bush. Jake squinted, trying to see better. Huh, he said to himself. That's weird. The car was dark blue, with no stickers or anything fancy on it. Jake couldn't tell if anyone was inside, but it gave him a funny feeling. He didn't know why. Maybe it was just the way it was parked, like it didn't want to be noticed. He shrugged and turned back to his bike, figuring it was probably nothing. Maybe someone was visiting a neighbor. Maybe it was a delivery guy taking a break. Jake wasn't the type to worry about stuff like that. He was too busy thinking about his next ride or what he'd have for lunch. What Jake didn't know, what nobody on the street knew, was that the car wasn't there by accident. Someone was inside it, watching everything. Not just Jake, but Karen too. Someone who knew things about the neighborhood that nobody else did. Things that would make your jaw drop. Karen thought she was in charge, thought she could boss everyone around with her clipboard and her rules. But she had no idea that her big plan was about to run into something much bigger. And Jake. Poor Jake was just caught in the middle, humming his tune, wiping down his bike, with no clue that this quiet Saturday was about to get loud in a whole new way. Karen's voice still echoed in Jake's head as he walked toward his front door. I'm done with that racket, she'd said. He shook his head again, smiling. She'll get over it, he told himself. But across the street, Karen was already dialing her phone, her fingers shaking with anger. And that strange car, it was still there, quiet as a shadow, waiting for something or someone. The next hour felt funny, like something wasn't quite right. Jake was still in his driveway, wiping down his shiny black motorcycle with a soft rag. He loved keeping it clean. It made the silver parts sparkle like stars. The sun was high in the sky now, and the neighborhood was quiet except for the chirping of birds and the hum of a lawnmower a few streets over. Jake thought everything was fine, but little things started to seem off. First, he noticed Karen. She was inside her house now, but every few minutes her face would pop up at the window. The curtains would wiggle, and there she was, peeking out like a spy in a movie. Jake could see her glasses glinting in the sunlight. She was holding her phone to her ear, talking fast, her mouth moving like she was arguing with someone. Jake tilted his head, curious. Who's she yelling at now? He mumbled to himself. Karen was always mad about something, so he figured she was just complaining to one of her friends. Maybe she was telling them about his motorcycle again, saying it was too loud or too shiny or too something. Jake chuckled and shook his head. Same old Karen, he said, going back to polishing his bike. But then something else caught his eye. Down the street, a few houses past Mr. Jenkins' place, he saw a car. Not a regular car like the ones neighbors drove. This one was different. It was a police car with a blue and white sticker on the side and a big antenna sticking up. The weird thing, it wasn't parked out in the open like police cars usually are. It was tucked behind some tall bushes and a couple of trees, almost like it didn't want anyone to notice it. Jake squinted, trying to see better. That's strange, he thought. Nobody's speeding around here, nobody's doing anything bad. He scratched his chin, puzzled. Maybe there was a problem somewhere else, like a lost dog or a broken mailbox. He didn't know, but it made his stomach feel a tiny bit funny, like when you're not sure what's going to happen next. Jake decided not to worry about it. Probably nothing, he told himself. He gave his motorcycle one last wipe, making sure it was super clean, and headed toward his house. Time for a soda, he said, grinning. He was thirsty after being out in the sun, and a cold drink sounded perfect. He walked up his front steps, his sneakers squeaking on the wood, and went inside. The cool air felt nice after the warm day. He opened his fridge, grabbed a can of soda, and popped it open with a fizz. He took a big sip, letting the bubbles tickle his nose. "Ah, that's better," he said, plopping onto his couch. He was ready to relax, maybe watch some TV or play a game. To Jake, it was just another lazy Saturday. But what Jake didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that things were about to get a lot less lazy. Across the street, Karen wasn't just talking to a friend on the phone. Oh no, she was doing something way bigger. She was standing in her kitchen, her phone pressed tight against her ear, and she was talking to the police. That's right, she'd called 911. "There's a disturbance," she told the person who answered. Her voice was loud and shaky, like she was reporting a giant emergency. "There's this guy with a motorcycle, and it's terrorizing the whole neighborhood," she said. "It's so loud nobody can think. He's ruining everything." The person on the phone, called an operator, didn't sound very excited. "Ma'am, can you tell me more?" they asked, their voice flat, like they'd heard this kind of thing a million times. But Karen didn't care if they sounded bored. She kept going, making it sound like Jake was the worst person ever. "He revs that engine all day and night," she said, which wasn't true at all. Jake only rode his bike during the day, and he was super careful not to bother anyone. But Karen didn't care about the truth. She wanted Jake in trouble, and she was making the story bigger and bigger, like Jake was riding his motorcycle through people's living rooms at midnight. "You have to do something," she demanded. "Send someone right now." The operator said they'd send a car to check things out, and Karen hung up, feeling proud. "That'll teach him," she muttered, a smug smile on her face. She looked out her window again, watching Jake's house. She was sure the police would show up, yell at Jake, and maybe even take his motorcycle away. Then the neighborhood would be perfect again, or so she thought. Karen crossed her arms and nodded to herself like she'd just won a big game. She had no idea that her plan was about to go very, very wrong. Meanwhile, that police car Jake had seen, the one hiding behind the bushes, it wasn't there because of Karen's call. Nope, it was there for a totally different reason, a reason nobody on the street would have guessed. The two officers inside weren't watching Jake or his motorcycle. They weren't even worried about loud noises or HOA rules. They were watching someone else. Someone who thought they were super snaky, but wasn't as clever as they thought. And Karen, with her big mouth and her big plan, was about to walk right into something she never saw coming. Back at Jake's house, he was still chilling on his couch, sipping his soda. He had no clue Karen had called 911. He didn't know about the police car down the street or why it was there. To him, the day was still normal. He flipped on the TV, looking for something fun to watch. Outside, the neighborhood looked peaceful, kids riding bikes, a dog barking somewhere, the sun shining bright. But Jake started to feel that funny feeling again, like something was off. He couldn't explain it. Maybe it was the way Karen kept peeking out her window. Maybe it was that weird police car. He shook his head, trying to forget about it. "I'm being silly," he told himself. "Nothing's going on." But something was going on. Across the street, Karen was still scheming. She wasn't just happy that she'd called the police. She was already thinking about what else she could do to make Jake's life harder. Maybe she'd write a new HOA rule banning motorcycles. Maybe she'd get all the neighbors to sign a paper saying Jake was a problem. She was so busy planning, she didn't notice anything else. She didn't see the police car Jake had spotted. She didn't know someone was watching her, keeping track of every move she made. Karen thought she was in charge, but she was wrong. Jake finished his soda and stood up, stretching his arms. He looked out his front window just to check on his bike. It was still there, shiny and safe in the driveway. But as he looked, he saw Karen's curtains move again. There she was, staring out, her phone still in her hand. Man, she's really not giving up today, Jake said with a laugh. He didn't know what she was up to, but he wasn't scared. Karen was always grumpy. It was just how she was. He turned away from the window, ready to go back to his TV. But outside, things were moving fast. That police car wasn't the only one nearby. Another car was coming, one Karen had called for, and the people watching from the shadows, they were getting ready to make their move. Jake's quiet day was about to get loud, not because of his motorcycle, but because of something much bigger. Something that would make everyone's eyes go wide. Jake was hanging out in his garage, messing around with his motorcycle. He was checking the tires, making sure everything was good for his next ride. The sun was still shining and the neighborhood felt calm like always. He was humming a little song, not thinking about much, when suddenly wee-oo, sirens cut through the air. Jake's head popped up. "Whoa, what's that?" he said, wiping his hands on a rag. He stepped out of the garage and saw a police car rolling down the street, its red and blue lights flashing bright. It stopped right in front of his house. Two police officers climbed out, one tall with a mustache, the other shorter with sunglasses. They looked serious but not scary. Jake's heart beat a little faster. What's going on, he wondered. Before he could even guess, Karen Thompson came running out of her house across the street. She burst onto her front lawn like a storm, her pink sweater flapping and her glasses bouncing on her nose. She pointed at Jake with a shaky finger like he was a bad guy in a cartoon. "That's him," she yelled, her voice so loud it made a kid on a bike stop and stare. "Arrest him right now. He's disturbing the peace with that awful motorcycle." Jake's mouth fell open. He couldn't believe it. "Are you serious, Karen?" he said, stepping forward. "It's just a motorcycle. I wasn't even riding it." He looked at the officers, hoping they'd see how silly this was. His bike was sitting quietly in the driveway, not making a single sound. But Karen kept going, waving her arms like she was trying to shoo away a swarm of bees. "He's been making noise all day," she shouted. "Nobody can stand it. You have to take him away." Jake shook his head, half laughing, half confused. "Karen, come on," he said. "Nobody else is complaining." The officers didn't look happy, but not at Jake. The tall one with the mustache held up his hand like a teacher telling a kid to be quiet. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, his voice firm, "you need to calm down. We're here to check things out, not arrest anybody." Karen's face got redder and she opened her mouth to argue, but the officer gave her a look that made her stop. Jake felt a little better. Maybe this wasn't a big deal after all. Maybe the police would just tell Karen to chill and go home. But then, oh man, things got wild. Another car pulled up super fast. It wasn't a police car with lights or sirens. It was a plain gray car, the kind you'd never notice. The door swung open and a woman stepped out. She was tall, with dark hair pulled back tight, and she wore a sharp black suit like someone from a spy movie. She walked straight toward Jake's driveway, her shoes clicking on the pavement. In her hand was a shiny badge, glinting in the sun. Jake's eyes went wide. "Who's that?" he whispered to himself. Even the officers turned to look. The woman stopped and stared right at Karen. "Karen Thompson?" she asked. Her voice was sharp, like a knife cutting through paper. Karen froze like a deer spotting a car's headlights. Her finger was still pointing at Jake, but it started to shake. "Why, yes," she said, her voice wobbly. "That's me." The woman didn't smile, not even a little. She held up her badge so everyone could see it. "I'm Detective Larson," she said. "We've been watching you for months. Did you think you could forge HOA signatures and steal money without us finding out?" The whole street went quiet. Jake's jaw dropped so low it almost hit the ground. "Wait, what?" he said out loud, his voice squeaking. Karen's face turned white like she'd seen a ghost. Her hand fell to her side and she took a step back, nearly tripping on her own lawn. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, but her voice was all shaky and her eyes darted around like she was looking for a place to hide. Detective Larson stepped closer, her face super serious. "Oh, we know exactly what you've been doing," she said. "Fake signatures, secret bank accounts, stealing HOA money to pay for your fancy trips and new car. Did you think nobody would notice?" Jake couldn't believe his ears. He looked at Karen, then at the detective, then back at Karen. "Stealing money," he said mostly to himself. His mind was spinning. All this time, Karen had been yelling at him about his motorcycle, acting like he was the problem. But she was the one doing something bad, really bad. He glanced at his neighbors, who were starting to peek out their windows or step onto their porches. Mr. Jenkins, the old guy with the flowers, was standing by his mailbox, his mouth open. A kid on a scooter whispered to his friend, "Whoa, is Karen in trouble?" Karen tried to talk again. "This is a mistake," she said, her voice loud but not strong. "I didn't steal anything. I'm the HOA president. I keep this neighborhood perfect." But Detective Larson wasn't buying it. She pulled out a piece of paper from her pocket and held it up. "We have proof," she said. "Bank records, emails, even pictures of you signing names that weren't yours. You're not getting out of this one, Miss Thompson." Karen's knees wobbled, and she grabbed her porch railing to stay standing. Her face wasn't red anymore. It was pale, like she might faint. The police officers stepped toward Karen now, not Jake. The short one with sunglasses spoke up. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us," he said. Karen shook her head fast, like a kid who doesn't want to go to bed. "No, no, no," she said. "You're supposed to arrest him." She pointed at Jake again, but it was weak, like she knew it wouldn't work. The tall officer sighed. "We're not here for him," he said. "We got a call about a noise, but that's not why we're staying." He looked at Detective Larson, who nodded. Jake was still standing there, his rag dangling from his hand. He felt like he was in a dream. "So my motorcycle's okay?" he asked, just to be sure. The officer with sunglasses gave him a small smile. "Your bike's fine, kid," he said. "Don't worry." Jake let out a big breath he didn't know he was holding. He looked at Karen, who was now arguing with Detective Larson, her voice getting quieter and quieter. "But I didn't do anything wrong," she kept saying. But nobody was listening to her anymore. The neighbors were all watching now. Mrs. Carter, the cookie lady, was on her porch, shaking her head. The kids on scooters were giggling, whispering about how Karen was busted. Jake felt a weird mix of things, shock, relief, and a tiny bit of sadness. He didn't like Karen's yelling, but he never thought she was a thief. All those times she'd bossed everyone around, acting like she owned the street. It was all to hide what she was really doing. Jake ran a hand through his hair, trying to make sense of it. Detective Larson wasn't done. She turned to the officers and said, "Let's take her in. We've got everything we need." Karen's eyes got huge like saucers. "Take me in," she squeaked. "You can't do this," but the officers were already moving. The tall one took her arm gently but firm, like he wasn't letting go. "Come on, ma'am," he said. Karen looked around like she was hoping someone would help her, but the neighbors just stared. Nobody said a word. Jake watched it all, his heart pounding. His motorcycle, the one Karen hated so much, was just sitting there, quiet and shiny. He'd been ready to defend it, to tell the police it wasn't a problem. But now he didn't have to. Karen's big plan to get him in trouble had blown up in her face, and the truth, the real truth, was out for everyone to see. The police weren't at Jake's house because of his motorcycle. Nope, they were there for Karen. It turned out she'd been doing something really bad. She was taking money from the HOA, that's the group that makes neighborhood rules, to buy fancy stuff for herself. She went on big vacations to sunny beaches and even got a shiny new car. All those perfect lawns she bragged about, she paid for them with money she stole. The detective, a lady named Larson, explained everything. She had proof, fake papers, secret bank accounts, and sneaky emails. Karen couldn't hide anymore. Karen's face was pale, like she'd eaten a bad apple. She tried to talk her way out of it. "This is a mistake," she said, her voice all whiny. "I didn't do anything wrong," but nobody believed her. The detective held up a folder full of papers, and Karen's words got quieter. The police officers put shiny handcuffs on her wrists. They weren't rough, but they were serious. "Let's go, ma'am," one officer said. Karen looked around, hoping someone would help, but the neighbors just watched. Nobody said a word to save her. Jake stood by his motorcycle, his eyes big. He couldn't believe it. All this time, Karen had been yelling at him about his bike, acting like he was the problem. But she was the one breaking the rules big time. He felt like he was in a movie. The neighbors started to whisper to each other. Some looked shocked, like they'd seen a ghost. Others shook their heads like they always knew Karen was up to no good. Old Mr. Jenkins, the guy who loved his flowers, walked over to Jake. He put a hand on Jake's shoulder and grinned. "Guess her sneaky tricks were way louder than your bike, huh?" he said. Jake laughed, still a bit dazed. "Yeah, I guess so," he said, shaking his head. The police led Karen to their car. Her head was down and she didn't look so bossy anymore. As they drove away, the street felt different. It was quieter, but not in a bad way. It felt free. Without Karen's angry glares or mean notes, everyone seemed to relax. Jake looked at his motorcycle, still shiny in the driveway. He smiled. It wasn't the problem after all, and now everybody knew it. Wow, what a wild day that was. Just like that, the neighborhood felt brand new, like someone opened all the windows and let in a big, fresh breeze. Jake went back to riding his shiny black motorcycle, zooming down the street with a big smile. The vroom vroom of his engine echoed a little, but nobody minded anymore. Not one person complained. Kids waved at him like he was a superhero, and old Mr. Jenkins gave him a thumbs up from his flower garden. It was like the whole street took a deep breath and said, "Phew, things are better now." Karen, well, she wasn't around to glare or yell. She had much bigger problems, sitting in a room with police trying to explain why she took all that HOA money. Every penny she stole was catching up with her, and she wasn't getting away with it. Jake's motorcycle wasn't the real noise in the neighborhood. Karen's sneaky secrets were way louder. She was always pointing fingers, acting like she was perfect, bossing everyone around with her clipboard and her fussy rules. She'd yell about Jake's bike, saying it ruined everything, but all along she was the one messing things up. She hid the truth, thinking nobody would find out, but secrets don't stay quiet forever. They come out like a balloon popping when you least expect it. And when Karen's secrets popped, everyone saw who she really was. It was Jake who was the problem. It was her, and she couldn't hide anymore. Then there's Jake. He stayed calm the whole time. Even when Karen was shouting and calling the police, he didn't get mad or yell back. He just shrugged, smiled, and kept being himself. He didn't need to prove anything to anybody. He knew his motorcycle wasn't hurting anyone, and he didn't let Karen's mean words get him down. That's the cool thing about Jake. He stayed chill, like a kid who keeps playing even when someone's grumpy nearby. And guess what? That's why he came out on top. While Karen was sinking in her own mess, Jake was still riding free, the wind in his hair, happy as ever. So what's the big lesson here? It's super simple. Don't judge people by what you think you see. Karen thought Jake's motorcycle made him